Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. We are going to head right down to the University of Virginia. We have Jennifer Lawless, professor, political science department chair at the university, and welcome as always, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, let's jump to it. Right now in New York City is an ongoing trial relating to former President Donald Trump. We have a jury. As of late yesterday, we had one alternate. They need 5 more alternates. Many political and legal pundits say they're ahead of the game as to where many predicted they would be. Where is America in relationship to this trial?
Well, I think everybody is watching closely to find out whether this is going to be the trial where Donald Trump oversteps. He's been very, very clear that he thinks this is unfair. He just released some statement about how it's so cold in the courtroom. This is just one more indignity he has to suffer. His team has been working tirelessly to try and get the prosecution to turn over witness lists and to, if not explicitly intimidate jurors, at least demonstrate that they're going to be as critical of these people as they possibly can be. And there is going to be a gag order hearing with at least 7 new incidents included in it. So, I think the American public is watching to find out first how far the judge is going to let him go. And then second, are we really going to be at a point where on Monday there are opening statements and the first criminal trial against a president of the United States actually takes place?
Well, think about it. It's only Friday morning. Between Friday and Tuesday's hearings on violating the gag order, is there really any chance that he won't violate the gag order between today and Tuesday?
So his lawyers are clearly working with him to try and figure out exactly how to get up to that line and not cross it. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, when he posts on Truth Social, they're not sitting with him in bed telling him, oh, you're a little too close. So I think it's likely that he will violate it. Keep in mind, though, that the judge has to figure out how to make sure that he's not giving the defense anything to suggest that he's being unfair or that he's, clamping down on Trump in a way that he wouldn't other people. The one other thing I would note about the conclusion of jury selection today is that for alternates, both sides actually have more peremptory challenges than they do for the actual jury. So they get 2 challenges per juror. So this could take quite some time today.
There was an interesting comment yesterday on CNN. It was the court artist who had been in the courtroom on Tuesday, all this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I think she was in the ante room on Wednesday. She said what was interesting was on Wednesday, it looked to be that Donald Trump was falling asleep quite often during the proceedings, and that on Thursday, it had been clear that the judge had ordered the air conditioning up, the temperature dropped, and the judge said it, so no one fell asleep and everyone paid attention. That's a dynamic. We're always used to hearing about Donald Trump's tremendous energy and seeing him in full vigor, but here he was, a 70-something-year-old man, nearly 80 years old, falling asleep during the course of the trial.
What's interesting is that because he is viewed as somebody with a lot of energy and a lot of vigor, the fact that he was falling asleep during the trial doesn't hit him the same way that it would have Joe Biden. A lot of the commentary, for example, was speculating that he's so bored by this that that's why he dozed off, not because he can't stay awake, or that he thinks this is such a witch hunt against him that that's why he couldn't even bear to pay attention. That's a very different situation than, oh, you're an elderly person who can't make it to lunch. And so he does at least have that on his side. I don't think that he's going to be seen as, particularly ill-suited for the presidency because of his age, simply given the fact that he dozed off. That said, this is a really, really important thing. He might think that it's not fair. He might resent the fact that he has to be there, but this is not a situation where, it's kind of incredible to imagine a defendant dozing off during something like this.
How does this break out? Let's say we go through the trial. I think we have a good expectation of who the witnesses are, what they're going to say. It's going to take a few weeks, and then it's going to go to a jury. Let's go through a couple scenarios, and we'll probably revisit this in the future as well. As of right now, if he were to be found guilty, how does that play on the presidential election come November?
This is the case that people are the least concerned about. And this was the case where most of the behavior happened before he was elected. People don't really think about this as election interference the way that they think about some foreign power interfering in our elections. And so it's a tricky case for Alvin Bragg to bring. And it's also a case that most people don't think, or at least Republicans don't think, would be as disqualifying as the January 6th cases or the documents case. So even if he's found guilty, it's unclear that that's going to be enough to move Republicans in a way that a guilty verdict in some of the other trials would. If he's not found guilty,
well, just
he's
stay
going to
on,
use it as
just stay on
complete
a guilty
vindication.
charge for 1 second. But how does it impact independents? Those people who, I get it's about 8%, maybe 10% of the voters who are independents or kind of undecided, they're swaying back and forth. They don't like this about Biden, they don't like that about Trump. Does it impact that independent group who are still undecided?
I think it might impact them to the extent that they might be more able to be mobilized by the Biden campaign around issues like abortion. So if they might have been leaning toward Trump or they were generally unclear as to their preferences, they might be more susceptible to Democratic messages. But I don't think that a guilty verdict is going to move a whole block of independent voters systematically away from Trump.
Okay, now if he's found innocent.
He's going to use that as complete vindication for all of the cases. And he's going to say, this is a perfect example of how this was a witch hunt. I did nothing wrong. It was all politics. Biden was behind this. There was no guilty verdict because I'm innocent, and I'm innocent in all of these other cases too. And I think it allows him to gain momentum, especially if none of those cases goes to trial before the election.
Okay, let's travel from New York City as we do spanning the globe, as they like to say over at ABC Sports. We'll head down to Washington, D.C. Mike Johnson, I know you hate to give any credit to any Republican under any circumstance, but
I love Mitt Romney.
Does Mike Johnson deserve a little bit of credit for saying, hey, listen, these are big issues, they're important. It may cost me my speakership, but I'm going to move forward because I think these things are important to the country and to the world?
Sure.
That is a major breakthrough in the...
I guess I would say a couple of things, right? The first is that he had to rely on Democratic votes to move the funding bills forward out of committee, and he did. But a majority of Republicans still supported what he wanted to do. So I think that Mike Johnson has learned a lesson from over the course of the last year, which is that you can either cave into these Republicans or you can cut a deal and potentially get saved by the Democrats and still do what the majority of your conference wants you to do. It's not like Mike Johnson and 4 Republicans are going to vote with the Democrats. The overwhelming majority of the Republicans are going to vote with some Democrats. And so, yeah, he put the country ahead of his own speakership. But in so doing, he pretty much solidified his position because the Democrats had already said that they would save him if he called for a vote on this funding bill.
Right. Why couldn't Kevin?
I don't think it was a really. I don't think there was a lot of bravery involved here. He knew what the outcome was going to be and that his job would be secure.
Kevin McCarthy couldn't figure out that math, though.
Well, Mike Johnson has the benefit of seeing what happened to Kevin McCarthy, and I think that Kevin McCarthy just didn't believe that they would actually do it. He called their bluff, and they weren't bluffing. But the other thing that's interesting about Kevin McCarthy is that all of the people that voted against him are having Kevin McCarthy dollars spent in their district trying to take them down. So Kevin McCarthy might have the last word on some of these people.
Okay, so what's going to take place this weekend in the House of Representatives? There's separate votes on aid to Israel, aid to the Ukraine, aid to Taiwan. No separate package for border security, though, correct?
Correct. And this was the biggest failure on the part of the Republicans. If they would have been willing to actually work with the Democrats a month ago or 2 months ago, they would have had border security and aid. Now what's going to happen is aid to Ukraine is going to pass, and there's no border security bill. Because they didn't get the bill that Donald Trump thought that they should be getting. And he also didn't want to hand Democrats any sort of bipartisan victory on immigration heading into November. But what this means is that the Democrats are going to be able to say the Republicans did not cooperate, and that's a problem on the border. And we were able to deliver aid to Ukraine. So it looks like it was a failing strategy for the Republicans. I think
Okay.
Mike Johnson's attempt here is to make sure that at least some Republicans in swing districts are able to claim credit.
Will Taiwan be approved by the greatest margin? Is that sort of the no-brainer on both sides?
I think so.
Okay,
And then
let's go to
Ukraine.
well, let's go to Israel. How many Democrats are going to vote against aid to Israel?
I don't know, and I also think a lot of it is going to come down to the messaging from the White House and what the Biden administration is willing to say they will do. I mean, Biden is already telling Netanyahu that this is not a blank check, that they're not going to support aid if he continues to operate the war the way that he's operating it. So, I don't know what kinds of sticks are going to be attached to the aid bill. There are a handful, obviously, of Democrats who are going to support aid to Israel no matter what. But, I think the extent to which this can become a far more bipartisan and much bigger margin bill helps Democrats who are in districts where it might not be as popular.
Well, but how big a stick are you really carrying if you're saying, here's $20 billion of aid, oh wait, don't do it again?
Right. So the don't do it again is not adequate, right? Like that's not really a stick. They've been saying don't do it again since October 7th.
And now they're giving them $20 billion.
Look, I think it's fraught. How's that for an answer?
How many Republicans are going to vote against aid to Ukraine?
I mean, I think a lot of it will depend on what they think the margin is going to be. No Republican is going to want to be pivotal,
Right.
but no Republican will be pivotal. If they know that the aid is going to pass and that they can continue with their talking points and say that, this is ridiculous, we're giving aid to Ukraine and we're not shoring up the border, they're gonna do it. But it's like very low stakes because the aid package is going to go through.
Is it 100 Republicans opposed to Ukraine? 20 Democrats opposed to aid to Israel? No one opposed to aid to Taiwan?
I think the numbers so Taiwan, I think is pretty clear. Like it'll be as close to unanimous as it can be. For Ukraine, I don't know. I would say 50 to 80 probably.
Yeah.
And as far as Israel is concerned, I really don't know. I think a lot of it really is going to come down to what Joe Biden says and what Hakeem Jeffries says to the Democrats. I mean, 20 is probably not 20 is not a far-fetched number, but I really think that's the hardest one to gauge at this point.
Okay, and let's go to our dear friend Robert Kennedy Jr. He is now on the ballot in Michigan, a nightmare scenario for Joe Biden, which is now, according to sort of the blended polls, is down about 3 to 4 points in Michigan, an incredibly important swing state come November. But simultaneously, his family disowned him, and then today, a joint letter, folks from the NRDC, of which I used to work with a number of them back in the day, people who worked with Robert Kennedy, urged him to drop out of the race. How does all this play out? And if I'm Robert Kennedy Jr., is any PR good PR when I'm trailing at 6 or 8%?
I don't know what he's thinking. I mean, I think that what's really interesting is that his family didn't disown him. They disowned him politically, right? They said
Correct.
that we love him, we like him, and you cannot vote for him for president. And his response is sort of like, families disagree. It's got to be hurting. I do think that the Biden administration getting the Kennedys on board to make the case that they're making is the best thing that they can do. It's really their only move at this point,
Right.
to paint him as an alternative to Donald Trump, as opposed to an alternative to Joe Biden, which is what they're trying to do. That could potentially be a successful strategy, especially if he's going to be on ballots in battleground states. But it's not great. The other thing that's kind of unclear about all of this is that he really is a wild card. I think the conventional wisdom was that he would hurt Biden, and the early poll numbers suggest that Biden might be taking a hit there. But his views are quite consistent with some of the views of Donald Trump. And then his campaign team released the statement that Trump had actually asked him to serve as vice president. And so my bet is that the Biden administration is going to be focusing on those kinds of things to cue people into the fact that if you want to vote for him, that's fine, but he's not the alternative to us.
Between hearing Robert Kennedy in recent presentations and then hearing his brothers and sisters speak yesterday. Do they all smoke 10 packs of cigarettes a day? None of them. None of them have a viable audio presentation. What's going on there in Hyannisport?
No, I think several of them do have voice issues. But look, to be perfectly honest, I think part of that is, I think that plays into a problem that he's having in terms of generating support. I remember when Bill Clinton was running in the primary in 1992, there was a lot of backlash. He lost his voice pretty early on. And I remember in the Democratic primary, Paul Tsongas and other candidates were saying that he didn't have the stamina to be president of the United States because he didn't have the voice to make it through a campaign. And, you know, obviously Robert F. Kennedy is dealing with a health issue that has affected his vocal cords, but that does convey a sense of weakness to voters, whether fair or not.
The most entertaining part of the week was Jesse the Body Ventura was on CNN last night and talking about how he, if he ran, would be the most viable candidate, would defeat Trump or Biden, and is younger than both of them. And let me tell you, Jesse the Body Ventura did not look like a young man last night on CNN.
Look, I just love the fact that men get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and assume they can be president of the United States. Now, granted, he was a governor, but that was a fluke, too. I just think the whole thing is crazy. First of all, any third-party candidate who thinks they've got a shot in a very strong two-party system just doesn't understand the way politics works. In a different world, that might be great, but Ross Perot got 19% of the popular vote and 0 electoral votes. As long as we have the Electoral College, it's just not a viable strategy. And second, somebody who's been out of politics for decades and who is old in and of himself, to genuinely believe that, I think probably needs to, you know, go back to where he was. It's just not feasible.
Listen, you get the last word. What should folks be looking at over the next week? Obviously, New York, Manhattan, this trial. What's the X factors as we watch this thing come across the transom?
Well, I think as far as the trial is concerned, you know, we think that there's a seated jury right now. Yesterday, we thought we had 7 jurors, and then we were down to 5 because 2 of them had their identities they compromised. The New York Times and other newspapers are doing everything they can to tell us all they possibly can about all of these jurors. I mean, we know what podcasts they listen to. We know what news outlets they frequent. We know what their positions are in their companies. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that on Monday morning, we're down some of the jurors that we had. The other thing that I would say as far as watching over the weekend is concerned is there's going to be a special election in New York next week. There are it's possible that Mike Johnson's margin is going to get even 1 less. And so if I were Hakeem Jeffries right now, I would be doing everything that I could to court 2 Republicans who are either leaving Congress or who are in districts where they don't really have to worry about a primary, and, you know, making the case that they can have plum committee assignments, they can have donations from Democratic candidates from Democratic members in the primary if they face one, and to come over to their side. I don't think that the party split has ever been this tenuous, and I think the Democrats would be crazy not to try and capitalize on it.
Has he thought about offering them the use of the gavel during the weekends and things like that to try and curry favor with a couple more, I hate to even utter the word moderate Republicans, if such a thing is even viable in the House of Representatives anymore?
I mean, I wish he was calling me and letting me know. I don't know. I'm happy to talk.
Professor Lawless, thanks so much as always. For everybody else, stay tuned. A lot going on. Fun fight in the Providence City Council, City Hall. The council versus the mayor over a bike path. Read more about it on GoLocal. Also, Amica filed a major lawsuit in federal court yesterday. GoLocal's got that. It's against 2 of the auto manufacturers. And of course, today's Friday. Who's hot, who's not? Check out the list. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Enjoy the great weather today, and enjoy the weekend.